All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the GKR, the great guy, Gavriel Kay Reed, and
The
we
literary event of the decade.
of the millennium, I think,
Oh yeah.
at least a century, anyway.
We're humble. We're humble. That's what counts.
But we are back. I'm back with my partner in crime, Evan, and we have two wonderful, wonderful guests, my friends, Josh from Red Fury Books and Joanna from Joanna Reads. And it's very special for me to have these two here joining us because I know that this book that we're going to be talking about today, A Song for Arbonne, is is special to both of them. So I think what we'll do here is, as usual, we'll start out non-spoiler to allow both, oh, everyone actually, of course, but I want to hear especially Josh and Joanna why this book is special to you. And then once we all finish doing our non-spoiler stuff, we are going to get into spoilers. We will warn you when we're about to do that, however. So let's just get started in the order that I saw you guys appear, and that would be you, Josh. You're up first. What did you think? I know the answer to this, but what do you think of this book, non-spoiler?
Yeah, so just to give some context to your viewers that may not have seen all the love I've done of GGK on my channel, Guy Gavriel Kay has become my favorite author, and it's only been over the last few years that I discovered him, and he does everything that I most value as a reader, and he does it all extremely well. And of all the Kay's books, I love all of them. Again, he's my favorite author. I consider five or six of them like truly S tier novels, and this is my favorite book of his. A lot of people may not put it their favorite, but they all kind of put it in that S tier. So just so you know, when you see this hour or however long this chat is, that I just keep gushing, it's because I just have a great love for this book and this author. I counted down my top 50 books last year, and this was number 4 on my list. And having reread it for
Wow.
this chat, I wonder if it should be higher. I mean, that's how high in esteem I place this book. So let me try to just distill spoiler free, what it is that I love about this book. First of all, a lot of it is personal. One of the main aspects of this story is a society that is steeped in music and art and poetry. And I'm a lifelong musician. I've been a music educator for 27 years. I've made my passion my career. And anytime that I see it just portrayed with such care and such love, and a whole society devoted to some things that I hold dear to myself, of course, I can't help but just gravitate towards that. But even beyond just the musical kind of associations in this book, there's kind of two themes that are like intertwined here that just always touch me. I remember about a decade ago, I was at a professional learning conference, and one of the things the person was trying to do was trying to challenge us to say, to fill in the blank, I am blank, I am a blank. And we weren't allowed to say things like our profession. I wasn't allowed to say I am a musician. I wasn't, people couldn't say I am a father, I'm a mother. We had to kind of just boil down our core being into one little statement. And it took me a while. It didn't happen at that conference, but I realized for me, what I am, I'm a learner. And I love to learn. It's one of my favorite things. And people that love to learn, we don't necessarily have to become experts in things because it's the process of learning that we gravitate towards. So I have always gravitated towards that in literature, and seeing a main character in this book named Blaise learn, it's something that just touches me. But kind of intertwined with that is another thing for me, is that it's the cross cultural connection and the cross cultural learning. I've been very fortunate in my career. I've taught at some really diverse schools. My current school, I think we have 60 different languages spoken at home. So we have such a huge, diverse population of students. And it's fascinating to learn about these students and their families. It's something I've always loved. I just got back from doing some travel. Anytime I travel and experience new cultures, I always love that. And I just love kind of the cross-cultural connections we have here intertwined with this learning. We have this main character that is learning about this culture that he just kind of scoffs at the beginning, and he kind of makes fun of it, and he doesn't understand it, and then you start to see him learn and grow and to understand and to see him change. And I just love the way that Kay did this. So I guess that's kind of my main points. I mean, everything else about this book I love. I love the characters. I think the plotting's superb. I think the subtle uses of some sort of magic are fascinating in there, the way that they're done. And I mean, his prose style. This is one of the, for me, peak books. You know, I've read everything by Kay now, and this is one of the 5 or 6 books where I think his prose is just absolutely perfect. And the older I get, the more I appreciate the craft. You know, and from a line by line standpoint, I don't know if there's any better in this genre. So that was probably long winded. So I'll stop and toss it to somebody else. But just to see, you know, how much I love this book, and I'm so excited to talk about it with the three of you.
Oh, that was perfect, Josh. Thank you. That was inspiring, actually. Thank you. And we are blessed here today to have not one, but two professional musicians, highly trained and knowledgeable people. And Joanna, you also come from a music background. Is that one of the reasons why this book is special to you? And of course, what are all your non-spoiler thoughts on A Song for Arbonne?
Very much so. I love everything Josh said, and it spoke to so much of what I love about this book as well. I pretty much could echo all of what Josh said, and I would just add that this is, in fact, I know this is a big statement, but I declare this, in fact, my favorite fantasy standalone of all time.
Oh,
This is
wow.
it. This is my favorite Guy Gavriel Kay book I've read so far. Now, I've not read as all of them like Josh has, but it's my favorite. And I think it is, there's so many things about this book, and I've been trying to meditate on it. What is it about this book? And yes, I think just generally speaking, I could say the power of song, because this song plays such an integral role in the story, in the plot, and the culture, and in changing minds, but also it's basically what Josh was saying about that transformation of being able to learn from another culture outside of your own, being able to learn from people. And I think that that actually is something, a theme that Kay showcases in his other books. You will find that in other Kay books that you read. But I think one thing that's also really special for me, and this is a, I don't know what this says about me or what it is about this particular feature, but I tend to be drawn, I've noticed, to books that showcase dual societies. And this book does it so well. The difference between the two societies that we explore in this book, the different cultural values, and I love that exploration. And the one character who comes from one and goes into the other and is changed. This is something that I love in The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is one of my favorite science fiction books of all time. In fact, Le Guin does this in a lot of books as well, in a lot of her science fiction books. And it's also featured in Midnight Tides by Stephen Erickson, book 5 of Malazan Book of the Fallen. I love the juxtaposition between the Lethery culture and the Tisador, is it Tisador? I think culture in that one.
Eater, yeah.
Or yeah,
Yeah.
reader, however you pronounce that. So I love it when we have that featured, that device featured in books. There's something about it that I always gravitate towards in storytelling. But there are so many other things about this book. I did do a review of this book, and I talked about how it personally touched me, how some of the atmospheric touches, the character of Lisseau reminded me so much of my younger self in a way. But I feel like there's also just so much beauty and eloquence to the prose of this book. And I know, Philip, you talk often on your channel about the importance of having fantasy books, like Le Guin said in her From Elfland to Poughkeepsie essay, how the importance of the prose matching that time period somehow, but at the same time being accessible, having that bridge between feeling authentic to a time and at the same time appealing to modern sensibilities. And I feel like Kay does that to perfection in this book. I think there's just so much great, beautiful uh, aspects of tone, dark, haunting, horrific scenes, violent scenes, and then there are also scenes of beauty, gorgeous atmosphere, and lightness of heart as well. Are just beautiful dynamics in this book. Um, yeah, I think that there's just so much of this book. I also love the way that Kay plays with setting in such a way, and I've noticed this is not the only book he does it in, but specifically he takes into account the time of day and how dark it is, how the moonlight is affecting the scene, little touches like that to me add so much to the story. But yeah, I think that this book is incredible. And you when you start the book, you might think that it's a pretty simple good versus evil type of story. But I think when you get to the end, you realize there's so much more there, and that one side isn't just all good, and one side is pretty bad. I'll say that, but one side isn't just like all good. There's like gradation there. So yeah, there's just so much to this book that I think is special, that speaks to my heart. I love the female characters in it. I love all the characters actually, and I'm just so excited to talk more in depth with you all.
All right. Wonderful. Yeah, this is going to be a very special discussion, I can tell already. But Evan, what are you thinking? What non-spoiler thoughts can you share with us?
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here with Josh and Joanna. I am interested in GJK in no small part because of some of Josh's videos and videos he's done with others, ranking the books and talking about them. That's how I heard about a lot of them. And Joanna, I am just familiar with so many of your videos and the videos that you've been on in other people's channels. You always have such insightful things to say. So in addition to being a tour through the works of GGK, this is Philip's tour. He's taking me through some of my favorite book talkers and introducing me to them, and I'm really enjoying that aspect of this too. On the book, I am happy and somewhat relieved to say that I really love this book. It certainly rewards the in-depth discussion that we're going to have about it today. But first and foremost, it's a good story, and it's a good story told with great skill, and that is the structure that supports and animates all of Kay's deeper interests. Um, I was transported into the world of Arbonne from the first word, and it's politics, its courts, its intrigues, its music, all its characters. I love being immersed in a story, and that's what I got from here. I felt like Joanna was saying, I felt the danger. And I also felt the beauty. I really felt those things in a tangible, physical way. A couple times I had to put the book down because I was like, wow, that was such a beautiful section. I just kind of want to bask in what just happened, reread it, try to figure out how he did that. And that's a great feeling too. The characters, the dialogue, the world building, the plot, the prose, for the sake of discussion, these are things that we often isolate when we talk about them. But I think that we all know that in reality, you can't really isolate those things when you're reading a book. And what Kay gives us here is a book that uses all the rhetorical tools he has in harmony, and he blurs those distinctions. It's a book in which character is plot, in which world building is a kind of characterization, in which prose is understood, and I think he's correct in this, not as a transparent window onto events, but as an instrument that actually helps shape and determine the story that we experience. And that's a particularly relevant fact in a story in which art is so central, in which it's a book about how art shapes the identity, the troubadour songs, the lyric poetry of the troubadours, how it shapes the identity of Arbonne and the characters that are living there. And it shows how art is a way that we kind of resist the brutality in human nature. That is part also of the story and the characters that we meet. So I love this book. I love getting to read Kay in order because I feel like I'm seeing ways that he's solving problems from his earlier books in different ways. He's improving, and it's a joy. So I had a blast with this one, and I'm excited to talk more about it.
That's beautifully said, Evan. I love what you're the last thing you're talking about, especially the power of music and art in general to elevate us, to give us the ability to transcend ourselves and to connect with others. And that is something that's really central to this story. I connected with this really hard. I loved this story so much. And a lot of it was what Josh was speaking about as well, the intercultural aspects of this, where you have a character who is dismissive and even arrogant toward another culture and goes on a journey, a physical journey and an internal journey, which also leads to a whole lot of self-discovery as well. It's something I relate to in my own life. I've traveled, I've lived abroad, and it's transformed me. I wouldn't be who I am, absolutely, without those experiences. And I think that those experiences have made me a better person and have made me more empathetic, better able to connect with other people. The medievalism of this, of course, I'm a medievalist. This is my jam. I love this stuff. I've always admired the troubadours. I've always felt the tragedy of what happened to the Cathars in the Albigensian Crusade. This was a form of Christianity that many people. We're going to talk about it. I'm sure Evan has done it. Like I read a billion books on it, so we're going to talk about it. But I
You
feel,
know me too well.
yep, I feel the tragedy of this episode in history, all too familiar, honestly. The othering, the dismissing of a worldview that actually recognizes the equality of everyone, of women and men, and the Cathars were. In some ways, women had a much better position among the Cathars than they did in medieval Christianity as a whole. And that was one reason they were attacked, among others. So I'm sure we're going to get into that. But yeah, the whole setting, the inspiration behind the setting, I should say, was another just thing I loved. And then the music, the music. I just love music. I'm a sucker for music scenes in books in general. I have a tendency to get weepy when music scenes are on the page. But again, it's about that power of music to elevate us and to connect us, that I find so wonderful. And Kay handles the music scenes just magnificently. There's one in particular that I have to talk about. There were
Oh yeah.
two moments in this book that brought me to tears, and one of them was that music scene. I'll talk about the other one later. But yeah, and I do think that Kay's. So, Evan, you and I are only like, no, we're not even a third of the way through this journey. And I do feel though that I'm sort of getting a feel for Kay's authorial voice. And I
Totally.
feel like this particular period is perfect for his voice, the troubadours and all that. So I think that's one reason why this book works so well. And then finally, yeah, I mean, another reason is his ability to write these just iconic scenes. And we've seen this in every single book where there are these scenes that just are seared in my memory. There's so much tension and often beauty in these scenes, and I'm going to have to talk about several of them during the spoilers. But they're just this ability of his to write a scene that leaves me with my jaw hanging open and thinking, wow, there was just that was such a turning point in this story, for this character. So much insight gained from just that moment, his ability to introduce a character in a scene with great tension in it, and then I feel like this character's been with me for hundreds of pages. I just got to know this character, and I already feel like, wow, this is a vivid character. It's tremendous. So yeah, I had a great time with this book. Love this book. I can't rank these things. I've no ability to rank, because every time I read a book by this guy, I think, oh, this is now my favorite. So, but I don't know. I
We're gonna force you to rank. We're gonna force you to rank them.
at the end of it all, yeah.
This one's easily my favorite. It was the second one I read by him. I read Lions of Valrasan, this one, The Serentine Mosaic, and A Brightness Long Ago. And this one is definitely my favorite. And I usually, the first time I read it, because I did reread it with audio recently, I attributed it solely to the music and my background with music and how special and personal it felt because of that. But after the reread, I really think the music is so important in this book, but I think that the beauty of this book goes beyond it too. I think that just there's so
Oh yeah.
much there. And I just want to add that I love Evan's insight about the language, the prose, and almost like using the prose as an instrument of beauty to convey the story. I think that that's so well said for this book.
Yeah, marvelous. Josh, anything else you want to add for the non-spoiler section?
No, let's dig in.
Okay, well, first though, Evan has got something he wants. We're still going to be non-spoiler for a bit.
Oh, this is going to be digging in. All right. We're digging in.
Digging in. Okay,
Let's
but this is
go.
not spoilery though, or
Digging
is
in
this
non-spoiler.
It is
Okay.
non-spoiler. It's not spoiler.
non-spoiler? Okay, we will announce
You
when.
count medieval history as spoilers. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, so we're doing medieval history now. Let's do it. And because it is relevant, it is important, and I think Guy Gavriel Kay actually wants people to look at history as they go through his books. I think it would please him probably. He seems like that kind of a person who would be pleased if we read this book and then say, you know what, I want to find out what happened there to this culture. So Evan, take it away.
Well, I think it adds a lot to the experience, particularly because I think, Philip, we've entered the phase of his career, which is often referred to as historical fiction, with a quarter turn to the fantastic. And the journey from Fionavar to here is very interesting, in terms of how he moves away from mythic and gets closer to history, and the magic gets less and less prominent. We can talk about that. But understanding the history behind this story is so enriching, I think, for the story itself, in the ways that he pulls from history and also the ways he diverges from history, because he's trying to do things that are, if he wanted to, just talk about this period, he would have wrote a historical novel, but he's got a few different ideas in mind. So let's talk about the historical background of this, and I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second.
Yep. And
Okay.
Evan, you're almost as bad as I am.
I know. Technology. Okay. You see that? Do we see that?
Yep.
Yes, brilliant.
Okay. So around 800 AD, Charlemagne, king of the Franks, famous Charlemagne, he rules much of Western and Central Europe. But in the decades after he dies, the great Frankish Empire, the great Carolingian Empire that he created, breaks apart, and power gradually shifts to regional lords. So that by the time you get to the period on which A Song of Arbonne is based, which is roughly the 12th and 13th centuries, you get a kingdom of France that looks like this. Okay, and so that dark blue spot in the top right and a little bit more is all that the French crown really controls in this period. The rest is made up of semi-independent principalities, each with their own hereditary local nobility, men who are technically nominally vassals of the French king, but the kings are weak. And so in practice, these regional lords rule their own land from fortified castles, and under the feudal system, they parcel out that land into even smaller holdings, which you can see here, in exchange for loyalty and military service. It's messy, it's confusing, it's constantly changing. I'm not going to talk about how half of this map is actually controlled by the English of this period. It's very it's very confusing, but there is one way you can split this kingdom up into roughly two parts by language. And you can see here on the right, in northern France at this period, they spoke, and please pardon my pronunciations, the langue d'oil, which is the direct ancestor of modern French. And in the south, they spoke the various dialects of Languedoc, or Occitan, which is a related but different Romance language. So despite the political fragmentation that you can see in that picture on the left, all that political fragmentation, the shared common language in the South does create something, does foster something of a shared cultural identity. And that's reinforcing differences that already exist between the two regions. In northern France, the shattering experience of 2 centuries of Viking invasions had created a strong military society. And we see that in the book with Gorhot, obviously. The great principalities of the north were centralized authoritarian states. And the south, on the other hand, south of France, had scarcely been troubled by the invaders, and constant war had not molded its institutions. The strenuous efforts of its rulers had failed to impose on it the thoroughgoing feudalism of the north. So in the north, in the colder north, you get more of a severe militaristic society organized by feudal hierarchies in which the knightly code of chivalry becomes prominent in literature and life, and in which the church, which was at this time reforming and trying to strengthen its own authority, has a strong grip on the landowning classes. In the warmer South, which is sort of what Arbonne is based on here, spared of the worst of the Viking raids and large-scale external wars, you get a less militaristic society with a looser feudal structure. There's a lot more allodial land in the South, which is land that's held free and clear of any superior obligation. It's much more common, in addition to oaths of vassalic allegiance, it's more common for the nobles down here to have pacts or conventions of non-belligerence that don't imply any subordination. Politically, it's a more decentralized region. It's a region with a stronger urban culture. And we see the cities prominently in A Song for Arbonne while still being overwhelmingly rural. It's a region where the Orthodox Church has less power. And finally, it's a region that is rich with influences, contact via its shipping ports with the Mediterranean cultures, the Eastern cultures, and the Muslim Spanish cultures. So it's a society that permits the rise of two phenomena that are vitally important elements of A Song for Arbonne. And they are, already mentioned by Philip, Catharism and the religious heresy known as Catharism, and the troubadours and their idea of finamore or courtly love. So first, let's do Catharism real quick. Catharism was a dualist Christian sect. Dualist is important, which just means that they taught that the spiritual world, the world of the spirit, was created by a good God, while the physical world was the creation of an evil demiurge. So physical matter is part of that evil principle. For that reason, they rejected a lot of the things the Orthodox Church was doing. They rejected baptism by water. They rejected the Eucharist. They rejected veneration of the cross. They rejected marriage and the eating of meat, the authority, hierarchy of the church. They rejected the idea of the physical incarnation of Jesus Christ. So you can see how this would be a major issue. It's unclear how much Catharism penetrated into Occitan culture, because all we really know about it comes from Orthodox Christian sources, and they have an interest in portraying it as depraved and dangerous and widespread. But it seems pretty clear that it had a significant foothold on the region, and a lot of nobles, if they weren't Cathars themselves, were at least sympathetic to Catharism and were willing to protect them. In 1209, Pope Innocent III called for a crusade to wipe out this heresy, launching a bloody 20-year conflict later known as the Albigensian Crusade, which took place not in the Holy Land, but within Christian Europe against the people who were themselves Christian. The Albigensian Crusade and the brutal Inquisition that followed. Fascinating subjects. I'm not going to go too deep into it. Suffice it to say that by the time it was over, it ended with the destruction of the Cathars. Many, many Cathars were burned alive, and thousands more were massacred. It ended with the subjugation of southern France and the decline of its distinctive culture, which was gradually brought under the political and cultural dominance of the North. Now, that's really interesting, an interesting thing to talk about later, because the ending of this book is not quite the same as the ending of the Albigensian Crusade. There's a slight difference there, a big difference. The other phenomenon that emerges, of course, is the phenomenon of the troubadours. Poet, musician, performers, rock stars of the time, often aristocratic, sometimes women who were creators of this highly sophisticated secular courtly culture. They sang about a lot of things. They sang about politics and morality, but they're most well known for developing this ideal of finamore, or courtly love, which portrayed love as a refined, often unattainable devotion to a noble and often married lady. Now, I've overstated a few things in this spiel for the sake of drawing a contrast. but you cannot overstate the importance of the troubadours on Western culture. They are the first great tradition of vernacular lyric poetry in Europe, and Finnemore is simply put the first discourse about the psychology of secular romantic love in the West. All the rest, Dante, Shakespeare, Jane Austen, When Harry Met Sally, Romanticy, all of it owes something to the troubadours. They weren't wiped out by the Albigensian Crusade, but the war did close the chapter on its golden age, which was the second half of the 1100s. And after this, they moved into other regions like Catalonia, Aragon, Italy, the Holy Roman Empire. And the last thing I just want to say is that on the point of overstating, it's tempting to see the North-South divide in this period as a divide between a hard, macho, belligerent culture that's cruel to women and hostile to the arts on one side, and on the other side, a refined, tolerant, cosmopolitan culture where women are revered and even respected, and beautiful lyric poetry is always echoing from castles and festivals. In some ways, that's the contrast that A Song for Arbonne is trying to make for its secondary world, which is not France. But Kay does try to complicate that in a number of ways. In the real world, there's a great deal of truth to that contrast, but it's also an oversimplification. The South may have been spared the Viking invasions, but they weren't spared the ravages of near constant private wars among the local lords. The decentralization of the region that I talk about was a recipe for destabilization. The north of France wasn't really hostile to the arts. It had artistic brilliance of its own. That's where we get the chanson de geste and the chivalric romance, which modern fantasy owes so much to. And finally, it's undoubtedly true that despite playing such an exalted role in the songs of the troubadours, women in the medieval world were treated with cruelty everywhere. And so that is the historical context that we're dealing with here. Kay is deeply researched in this period and these cultures, and it informs everything that happens here. And where he diverges for his own reasons. And those are interesting to discuss too. So I got a lot from that from reading the book. And so I'm hoping that if you're out there and you're going to be reading this book, you'll get something from that. I hope.
Just to add to that point of complexity that you made at the end of that presentation, Evan, there were definitely Catholics in the south of France who tried to protect the Cathars from what was going on. And to the degree that there was one particular massacre at Béziers, where the papal legate, this is a famous quote from the crusade, where the papal legate, they asked, what do we do? You know, inside this city, there are Catholics right alongside the Cathars that were set to kill. And the legate said simply, caedite eos, novit enim dominus, qui sunt eos. Kill them all, for the Lord knows those who are his. So just kill
God will
everybody.
sort them out.
God will sort them out. That's right.
Yeah.
So just kill everyone. And if they were Catholic, oopsies, God will sort them out. Yeah. So, but that's a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. That's very informative. Anything you want to say about that, Josh or Joanna?
No, this was great. This was a good review for me. I was saying before we went on, we studied the troubadours, of course, in music history in undergrad, but that was for me about 30 years ago. So it's been a while. But the last point Evan made about their importance cannot be understated, even in just the development of music, because it is some aspect of music that we do still study, when you're getting a degree, because they were so influential and they did go beyond France, but especially in Spain. I remember studying specifically a lot of the troubadours in Spain probably after this event. But yeah, it can't be understated, in addition to just the influences you mentioned, just the musical influences that they provided from their, just remember the unrequited love and
Yeah.
they were kind of maybe the first rock stars.
They were such rock stars of their time. Like sometimes they even had their stories told, like their life stories told. And like you said, there were female troubadours. They were called troubadours. And there were actually a tradition of them in northern France that were called trouvères.
Mm.
But yeah, the troubadours is where it started with the Occitan in the southern France. But yeah, it is something that's widely studied. It's really interesting because I don't think we have a lot of their music left. And then what music we do have, there's a lot of different interpretation about how it's performed, but we still have, I mean, some of it preserved. And they had mostly songs about courtly love, and the whole idea was about the woman who is married and unattainable, and this causes the person to have to work really, really hard to get her love, which he'll never get. But it's it's like aspirational, this aspirational feat of the person. And there were also songs, different kinds of songs, like songs that were not just about courtly love. I think there were some songs that delved into some other things, like such as war. And there's one about
Yeah.
Robin and Mary, Robin and like Robin Hood, sort of, so to speak. And then there were songs called albas, which was when a morning song, whenever they would call out, "Hey, the dawn's coming, you gotta leave the lady so before her husband comes back," or whatever. So uh, yeah, so really cool history there. I really appreciated that presentation because there was a lot there that I did not know about. And yeah, it adds a lot of context to the book.
Yeah, those are some great points, Joanna, because this impulse to elevate women in troubadour songs, it's not really a feminist thing necessarily.
No, no, no.
It's really much more of an accident of the social hierarchy in some ways, because you typically noble people would be an old guy who would marry a young woman who just for the purpose of having an heir or out of a political alliance or what have you. And uh, obviously a situation like that might give rise to all these young single knights serving this old lord, having some attachment to, but using that as a kind of a purifying thing, like you said, that she's unattainable, and therefore the longing, the love is there's a kind of a purifying aspect to this that is, it was, at least in its most ideal form, seen as similar to aspiring toward heaven or what have you. And of course, there were all kinds of messy in
Well,
the real
I
world.
think
Yeah,
the discourse, the messiness of that discourse, the discourse of courtly love is a very complex and
yeah,
hypocritical discourse. And I think Kay is, and we're going to talk about this, Kay is engaging with that directly, I think, in his female characters. And I'd love to talk. We should probably move into spoilers, but
yep.
that that is something he's engaging directly with in such an interesting way.
It is officially time for spoilers. Then,
Yeah.
so wave. I'm waving my hands. Time for spoilers. Come on, everybody, do the wave.
Spoilers.
Yeah, we are doing.
Spoiler robot. That's
I like that one. I like that one. We're gonna have to use that. So it is time. So if you have not read A Song for Arbonne, what are you doing? Go read it.
Yeah, go read it.
Please.
Go.
It's a
have
magnificent.
mine.
Yeah, have Evans. But now we're doing spoilers. So there's so many things I want to talk about here, but I think there was something you wanted to mention in the beginning of our spoiler discussion, Evan. So if you want to go ahead with that, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go in too deep again right after I did that whole deep long thing.
You want to talk about the
But
prologue, I think.
let's talk about the prologue, and
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I want to hear what you guys think about it, really. But I think he's doing well. First, let me hear what you think about it, because I'm going to go into the text a little bit, and I don't want to just monopolize the time.
Cool.
So I would
Let's
love to
do
hear
prologue thoughts. Prologue
yeah,
thoughts.
yeah, because I think, like Tigana, it is a deeply important prologue section for setting up the themes and the action of the book that's going to come.
So yeah, there's the arch, which is a symbol that goes throughout the whole book, a symbol of conquest, of crushing underfoot the people that you have conquered and portraying them as the villains. So that is certainly an important symbol that gets introduced there. But then, of course, the main point of this prologue is to introduce us to these characters of Bertrand and Elise,
Elise.
Elise, who tragically does not appear in the rest of the book except in memory, because she dies giving birth to, well, turns out to be twins. But we don't know that until the end of the book. But
Spoiler.
dies giving birth because this was also a moment of defiance for her in this whole tryst with Bertrand, in terms of she was married to a man that she felt did not love her. There's a bit of a twist on that as well later in a bit of a tragic moment, really,
Yeah.
for Duke Urte. But also,
Rest in peace.
it's the introduction to the character in many ways of Bertrand, who, as a young person, isn't really thinking about the consequences of what he's doing and lives a life that consequently he never feels like he can love another woman like he loved Elise. So thoughts, Josh and Joanna, before I hand it over to Evan, on any of these aspects of our prologue.
Okay, first thing I want to ask, did anybody get Princess Bride vibes from that prologue?
Uh, I can see that now.
Now that
Yeah.
The
you mention
Dread
it, yeah.
Pirate Roberts
Yeah.
and Buttercup?
Yep.
Like that's what came up for me. I thought it was so perfect. Like it in the best way possible because I love that movie.
Yeah.
But that's basically what came to my mind with the romance there. And but no, I think we do get a lot of information, like you said, that big reveal about Utra de Miraval, Uta. I don't know how to say his name. De Miraval,
Urte? Is it? I think
Urte?
Urta,
Yeah.
Urte,
Urta. I
yeah.
think it's Orta, Orta de Miraval. I'll just go with that.
okay.
I think you nailed it with that. I think if I recall correctly, the prologue also, I mean, she not only is unsettled that this idea, she's defiant because she believes her husband doesn't love her, but
Mm.
there's also this idea that her father had her marry this man. And I think that sometimes there could be a misunderstanding of this book or the idea that it's woman ruled Arbonne and that we are free from patriarchy, but there is patriarchy in this society. And I think that that comes through in this. And even though we see the female characters, and we see this later with Ariane, I would say, are very willful. They're very willful. Every character actually in this book, I think, is pretty willful. But yeah, it is a patriarchy, and I think that she feels like she wants to she wants to have some agency over her situation, in addition, I think, to being truly attracted to Bertrand. And then there's also this matter of making a baby, which is interesting.
You know, one thing I've done, probably it's over the last decade or so, is novels that have prologues, I go back and reread them. And I think this is one of the most rereadable ones.
Mhm.
Even if you only, I mean, you can examine the symbolic things, but even just looking at the characters, even Ariane, just seeing how the effects of that prologue,
Mhm.
which we don't get the full story until, of course, the end, like her full story about how this was her growing up, but also Bertrand, who for me was such a fascinating character the entire book, and in fact might be my favorite character in this book because it was just so interesting to see this multi-layered character that was just still grieving 23 years later from the events of his first love. And, you know, if somebody that one of the things I love about Kay is you can take one aspect of his story and say it's this kind of book. Somebody could say that this is a love story or this is a romance, and I would say absolutely. And I think it really is if you look at it from kind of the perspective of Bertrand. So it's interesting seeing kind of the early part of him, especially rereading it after, getting through everything and seeing that scene again. But I know the first time I read it, the thing it did right away is I was hooked right away.
Mhm.
So it was definitely a good hook, even though it's we fast forward 23 years after it. But I just love the nuance of the characters and how you were introduced to a lot of elements that, like you said, we get later, but you don't really realize until later a lot of the things that are going on. And that's one of the things that amazes me also with Kay is that he is, if you watch his interviews, he's not an architect writer. He's more of a he does it subconsciously. He's not one of the ones that, he's the gardener. And the fact that he puts all this stuff early and you see the little threads like in this book, like Luth, like, come on, like, how did you
Yeah.
not plan
Oh
that?
yeah.
Like,
I
Oh
it's
yeah.
love
in
Luth's
there. I mean,
comeback. That's a comeback right
I
there.
mean, are you kidding
Yeah.
me? I mean, he's such a master in this book at doing those little things. So I gained a lot from rereading the prologue again and again because I actually reread the book twice for this chat because I listened to it and I loved it so much I wanted to read it again with my eyes. So I read it twice this year.
Wow, that's dedication. Wow.
Yeah.
So, Evan, what do you make of this prologue?
So I love what you both said. I mean, I also reread the prologue after the book because, which is not a practice of mine, but in this case, I was compelled to do it, just because I after reading Tigana, much later went back to see all that was laid out in that prologue, and wow, it is so layered, and what I see here is jumping off a lot from what Joanna said, which is about this idea of the reality and the idea of Arbonne being a matriarchal culture. Is it? It is. It, the people of Gorhat sort of describe it that way, but in reality, through the character of Elise, in the very beginning, we see how that's not really true, or at least it's very complicated. So I'm going to share my screen again real quick just to get into some of this because this is just a master at work here, total master. So I mean, the first thing on a morning in the springtime of the year, the first thing we get in this chapter is it's starting in the spring, and that is the conventional way, the typical way for a troubadour love song to begin. So Kay is telling us right from the very beginning that this is his love song. But it's not going to be an homage. It's also going to be a critique. It's not just going to be romance. It's also going to be realism. And we sort of get that right away. The reversal is that this is from the perspective of Elise. This whole prologue is focalized in a close third person from Elise, and that is not the perspective of most troubadour love songs, with the exception of the Troubarites, which I do also want to talk about. In the very beginning, at the very end of this first paragraph, we get she has a prophetic knowledge of she's going to be begetting a son at the end of this tryst. She's going on a tryst to meet her lover, who is the rival of her husband, Urte de Miraval, as we said. So there's something fantastical in the first paragraph. In the second paragraph, we go right into the realism. This is not a girl who's sneaking off in the middle of the night to go meet up with her lover. Elise had never been a fool and would not be one now. She knows that she needs a guard of people. She knows she needs to plan this. That's what's so interesting about this is that she has to navigate. She knows she has to navigate the situation with caution and cunning, because as a woman in this world, to get what you want, those are the qualities you need to have. And she spends much of this prologue reflecting on the ways that the world is unfriendly to women. Right here on the next page, women in a castle, even here in Arbonne, and that gets to Joanna's point, were guarded like spices or gold, locked up at night against whoever might be wandering in the silence of dark hours. So, like spices or gold, women are a commodity in this world, and they are. Elise herself was essentially bought, and sold at the age of 17 to the Duke of Miraval because, I'll get here a little further, you can see at the bottom, her father decided that he needed to be bound more closely to his allegiance to the ruling counts of Arbonne. And she comments right after that, a fate no different from that of any daughter of any noble house. So she is a prize. She is, even in Arbonne, which is supposed to be ruled by women and nicer to women. It's got the troubadours after all. Actually, no, she's got very few options, and she's being delivered up in a political marriage. Now that she's married, she's essentially the property of her husband, condemned to endure, and this is a gross but appropriate line, the sweaty night thrustings of a man who she doesn't love. And even if we go back a little bit here, even the way she looks is circumscribed by her culture. She can't put her hair down. She's not allowed to do that as a married woman because, that will be an incitement to desire of other men, So the way she has to act is very circumscribed. Her mother had a political marriage, but she was very, very lucky. She had a love match, but that's very rare. We can see that good luck is the most that a lot of these women can hope for. A kind husband or early widowhood. I mean, that's grim, but a reality. And the only other option they have is the withdrawn life in service of religion. And that's the choice that her sister makes, Beatrice. And we know that she goes into the service of Rianne. Just a little bit later after this, we get the Arch of the Ancients that Philip was talking about. And the Arch of the Ancients is the analog of the Roman ruins that are littered all throughout Europe at this time. You know, they still exist. They're still monumental as opposed to what they're living in their old life, and they're the source of mystery. But what she sees on here on this frieze is armored men in chariots carrying around shields and heavy swords, battling others armed with only clubs and spears. An image of men and women clad in animal skins, manacled, their heads bowed and averted in defeat, slaves. So I think Kay is encouraging us to make the connection here between slavery and a woman's destiny in this world, even in the world of Arbonne. And Kay keeps, if you read this prologue, he keeps using these words, destiny and fate. And it makes us think about how we conceive of the destiny for a romantic male hero in a story versus how we might think of the destinies of the women in Arbonne. And here's the key important line. Different women dealt with their destinies in very different ways. And what are we going to see in this book? We're going to see a group of women, I think six major female characters, all faced with the same similar destiny, dealing with it in their own ways. And all of them are going to sort of be related to Blaise in some way. We can talk about that too. But we're going to see this, and it's all going to come from, the choices that Elise makes in this prologue. Because for Elise, the sanctioned roads are all dead ends. So she has to take an unsanctioned one. And it's unsanctioned according to politics and religion, but according to the troubadours, there is like this little open space, this loophole of adultery, because they think of true love as almost being necessarily adulterous. So she takes that road. She's calling the troubadour's bluff in a way, and she's taking that road. But that's not what the troubadour songs, like Joanna was saying, they end usually before the consummation. In the prologue, we're seeing a female character actively organize and go on this tryst. She's going to have a baby. She's going to consummate and she's going to have a baby. And that's going to have huge implications for the rest of the story. Final quote at the very end of this prologue, which is just so beautiful and goes to all this stuff. Here. Elise de Marival, daughter of the Count of Arbonne, smiled then. The ancient smile of... Oh, sorry, it's not this one. It's this one. And it's right when they're about to consummate. She held her hands out then, a curiously fragile gesture as she stood half naked before him, her father's daughter, her husband's avenue to power, heiress to Arbonne, but trying to shape her own response today, now in this room, to the coldness of destiny. The coldness of destiny. And he lays her down where the slanting beam of sunlight fell, warm and bright and transitory. Because all the freedom that the women can have in this world is a transitory freedom. And it's such a beautiful image of the sunlight slanting. So he's amazing. I mean, this stuff is really special. And when I went back to read it, all this stuff just sort of leaped out at me. And I'm just highlighting like crazy because I was so excited by what he was setting up here. And then it made me think about the book differently too. So I love this prologue.
Evan, you hit on some wonderful things there. One of my favorite things you hit on is I'm getting the feeling that we're going to find this theme in about every book that Gavriel Kay has written, and that's the theme of free will, the idea of shaping your own destiny. Now, this is in the context here of being a woman in a patriarchal society, but this is something that more broadly applies, shaping your own, doing what you can within the confines of society that are around you. There's some room for you to make decisions and you can have an impact as a result. And that's something we see a lot with Blaise and with all the female characters. So that's a wonderful look at how that prologue just brilliantly sets up some of the major themes of this book. So, Josh, Joanna, you have any thoughts on any of that?
I feel like I need to go back and reread the whole prologue. So that was amazing. I feel like there are so many details there that are just like popping out at me now. Um, yeah, no, that's absolutely interesting. I'm trying to remember it accurately now because it's now been a couple months since I just listened to the audio version for my reread. But did she set up the whole entire encounter with him, or is that the idea?
I think they did it together. That's my
Okay.
understanding, is that they did it together, but she was an active participant
Okay.
in organizing
I
this.
think she was the leader in some ways, and
Yeah.
I think he was even a bit like, this was young Bertrand, right? He's just
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
the older seducer. This he's clearly inexperienced and a bit nervous about this, but she kind of leads this. She wants
Um,
this. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I remembered that wrong because I just got this impression that she was genuinely surprised when he unmasked himself or when she figured out who he was,
Oh, and I
but
think she knew all along. It was
she knew
all
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
along.
set up,
Got it.
very much set up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Well,
Although for
I take back my Princess Bride connection. But
And like Josh was saying, Ariane is watching all of this. You
yes,
And
know.
she
I love
doesn't
that.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, and she
Yeah.
And
doesn't know.
that does make a difference when you think about how she takes matters into her own hands, so to speak, later on in the story, for sure. And then I did get the impression, and I don't know if I'm remembering this wrong either. So, like I said, I should probably go back and reread that prologue. But wasn't Bertrand? Didn't he have a moment right before the screenshot that you showed at the end? Didn't he have a moment of fear about this, like in realizing what a big deal this was that they were about to do, like the weight of what they're about to do kind of descends on his shoulders in that moment,
Yeah.
even though he takes the step forward and consents and does the deed with her.
Well, she does tell me that she does tell him that they're going to conceive, and that's a that would be a shocking thing to
Heavy.
hear
Yeah.
Yeah,
at any
yeah,
point.
yeah.
But she is making a decision, like she's making she's deciding to make a personal decision regardless of the political consequences. She's fully aware what the political consequences are, but she knows that it's gonna later in the book, Beatrice realizes that the sort of the rot at the core of Arbonne is this rivalry between Urte and Bertrand. And
Hmm.
that is a rivalry that is really obviously fired up by this encounter and what happens in the child and all that stuff. So she knows, like, she, again, it's this theme of a woman's choice in the medieval society is hemmed in, and in order to get what she wants, she's having to she's having to potentially cause problems for a lot of people, and it does cause problems for a lot of people. It almost means that they won't survive the onslaught of Gorhot, and so yeah.
he starts all this emotion. Also, shout out to Valerie, who keeps getting shot by an arrow in the shoulder for his character.
Right.
Love Valerie.
Yes.
Now, Evan, I really liked your point about how when you look at the role of women here and you look at the main women in this book, how they all make their decisions, but they're in very different ways. That's going to be interesting to kind of explore as we look at each character, because when you contrast just the way Elise handles something versus how Rosala handles something, or the woman
Exactly.
that Ariane becomes, they do within those constraints, they do find a modicum of freedom and able to make some decisions, but they are some very they have narrower choices, I guess is probably the easiest way to put it.
For sure, for sure. All right, are we ready to move on then to the story proper? I feel like we are. So, so many important characters to talk about, but I think the obvious one to start with is Blaise, who we meet initially as a humble Koran, who's not doing a very good job of appearing as a humble Koran. But he is in this other land, and as we said from the beginning, he is dismissive of this culture, of these people. But he's run away, more or less angry and in shame at the compromise, the treaty that his father engineered and had his father Galbert engineered and had the king Adamar sign with their longtime rival. because Galbert has this scheme, this lifelong desire to crush this feminine culture next door to him. And Adhemar is, of course, a hedonist, a narcissist who simply sees an opportunity to exercise his worst impulses. But yeah, Blaise, he's a character that I personally immediately liked, even though you could see that even as he is dismissive of these people around him, that he's a thoughtful person, this is a person who's grown up in a culture that has taught him their own superiority his whole life. And he's now forced into another culture, the very one that he has been most dismissive of, and is open-minded enough to begin to learn. And that's what I love about this guy. As you said in the beginning, Josh, he's a learner. Blaise is a learner. So thoughts on Blaise, guys? Go for it. Who wants to start us off on Blaise? Go ahead, Josh.
I'll riff on the learner thing because one of the things I liked about it was a lot of it was self-learning. Like when he would get into a situation, like the when he initially is making his way to Talair and he has to fight all those people, and he didn't realize he was in a different part, the border between Muraval and Talair, and he got into some trouble there, and he thoughtfully said, well, maybe I should have researched a little bit. And then there's other times where characters just call him out. Like Valeri at one point was like, maybe you want to like learn a little bit about these people that you're dealing with, and you see that a little bit with Rudel, as well, that kind of calls him out. So you see kind of both the internal journey that this character goes on, but you also see some external forces there where people just kind of call him out. I think Arion it does it a couple, like when they have their little encounter during was it midsummer's or midwinter or the festival when they got together. You see that as well, and I love that because it was ways for him to just kind of be nudged, and I think it also kept him as a reader, it kept him from looking at as a Gary Stu type of thing where he's just going to keep learning and keep growing and all of that, when people were basically giving him crap about the things he wasn't doing well, and it was making him become thoughtful and growing in that manner. So yeah, he was an easy character to gravitate towards, and in many ways he might be Kay's strongest central protagonist of his books.
Mhm.
In many ways, he really is. I mean, there's a few that I would kind of put top tier, but Blaise is definitely one of them.
You mentioned all the call outs, the where he's sort of questioned. My favorite one is Beatrice, when he has gone to the Isle of Rion to kidnap the troubadour on behalf of the minor. I get, was he a duke? He was a minor duke.
Yeah, yeah. But
And
his first boss basically in
his
the
first
region.
boss
Yeah.
in Arbonne, and she basically and she scares him because of course if she's a character who we most see the magical elements through here with the owl and the vision, and later she sort of downplays it a bit, but there's magic, clearly there's
Yeah.
magic in
Yeah.
here. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. There's magic.
there's magic. I mean,
There's certainly magic, but I
yeah,
think he's doing a lot to kind of keep a distance from this
yes,
because
I agree.
y- you know. But
But
yeah, there is
he
some.
doesn't dismiss it outright. It's not like she says, "Oh, actually, it was just I had it up my sleeve the whole time."
Yeah. But
It was
what's the most magical thing that happens in the book? Like, what would you say is the most magical moment of the book?
Well, I would say Beatrice's knowledge of
Yeah. Yeah.
Knows about his
not only the
past.
past but the future,
And
Yeah.
yeah.
and
Hmm.
having, for example, the Luth training him for that one moment later on when he would shoot, and he had to learn how to shoot an arrow up into the sky so it would come down. I mean, there's foresight. There's clearly foresight. So if you regard that sort of thing as magic, then there is some magic in here. That
Yeah.
there's definitely, in my opinion, at least, and seeing through the owl, and having the owl also choose Blaise in that moment.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
That's a great moment.
oh,
Yeah.
that's my favorite moment of the book.
no
Wow.
kidding. Okay.
The
Wow.
moment in Midsummer when it flies onto him.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a great moment. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
powerful moment. Yeah.
Your thoughts, Joanna, on Blaise?
Yeah, I love the introduction of Blaise and how he's rolling his eyes and it's like, oh, Arbonne, this like courtly love and all this attention
I
to the
don't like
women.
music. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a kick out of it. I thought it was kind of funny, and I love what you brought up about Beatrice and how she has an effect on him early on in the book. Uh, it's and I agree with Josh. I remember I want to say Luceau was one of the people too who called him out, like, hey,
Yeah.
why would you want to travel and not learn something about where you're traveling to? And I think his idea is he did leave because he was bitter over that treaty, like you said, Philip. And I think the idea was he wanted to, even though he disagrees with what's going on in Gorho, he wants to maintain some of his masculine identity. And I think that that is one of the most powerful things of the book is how we reframe what masculine identity can be, that it doesn't have to be this negative, vile, misogynist perspective. And I love how not only does he change in that moment, but another moment that I think is so riveting for me is when Bertrand puts him in his place a couple of times early on. And I love the scene where he's trying to prevent Bertrand from going upstairs in the tower.
Oh, that's
to-
so good.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're not going to stop a woman from getting what she wants or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there was also the song about Gorho and about the treaty. And I think that's a pretty telling song or a moment because beforehand, Blaise was so dismissive of the troubadours and of the songs and the culture. But then when he hears that song, that stops him in his tracks. Like that is a moment that sinks into him, and he's against it, obviously. Um, so it speaks to that identity. It speaks to a breakdown and yeah, that's not who I am. That's not the masculinity I stand for, so to speak. And I think like I love that you brought up Beatrice because it is presenting a different aspect of womanhood or that women aren't just all the same, that there are different types of women and we get that very distinctly through all the different female characters. Um, so yeah, I think that all those moments are just really incredible. I want to say one more thing, and I think this is kind of related to Bertrand. I don't know if it's too early to mention this, but one of my favorite moments in this book too is how when Bertrand ends up hiring Blaise as a mercenary, he says, I need somebody who knows when not to kill.
Hmm.
Because that comes into play early on when he crosses the boundary he shouldn't, and then he ends up having to kill get to get through that and ends up causing this unsettlement, obviously, between Miraval and Bertrand's court. But also, I think it comes into play later on in the book at the end with him holding back Bertrand from wanting to just go outright and keep killing. So
Good call.
there's just so much in his character. Oh, so many moments. I mean, we're just talking about the beginning of Blaise, but Blaise goes through such a transformation throughout the book. And then we start to learn more and more and more, especially towards the end with the relationships with his father and his brother too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much I want to talk about here because you guys
So
are bringing
much.
up such great points. Just quickly on the point of that moment where he steps in, he's not quite aware of where he is, and he gets into that fight on the borderland of that's a moment that actually has real consequences in the book because the person one of the people that's killed in that I think I'm remembering rightly is Kuzman's brother.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that results much later in the book in this beautiful set piece of him having this duel where he beforehand announces his intention to become the usurping king of Gorha to the people. And so there just these little things that nothing is left, nothing is left on the side. Like it all connects. On
Yeah, I
Blaise
love that
personally,
though, because he
yeah,
chooses to make that moment into something bigger than it was. It's not a
totally.
duel between him and Kuzman anymore. It's his moment to announce his intention to become king. And it's the moment if he wins the duel, he looks very kingly, obviously, and he becomes more convincing. Of course, if he had lost, he would have looked like a schmuck, but
But on Blaze specifically, one thing I really like that Kay did in this book, and it was a slight critique I had of Tigana. The most complex character in Tigana we've talked about many times is Dianora.
yeah.
And one of the things that bothered me a little bit about Dianora's characterization is that Kay uses a technique which I sometimes find boring, which is the she changes her mind via epiphanies that go on her own head. So it's like a long interior section where she's thinking of things and then she realizes it's different, and it's all sort of like an internal therapy session. And by the end of that internalized period, she's got a new idea. And writers sometimes do that, and I can find that boring sometimes because there's nothing being pushed against. For Blaise, he's in all these amazing scenes where he's surrounded by the characters of Arbonne, and they're just battering him. Like they're sharpening his perspective on things by challenging him at every turn, and we get the perspective of these characters as well in those scenes. And my favorite one is the one that we talked about before, which is the one at Midsummer, where he's like, and I think it was sort of Signe, the Countess's plan. She's like slowly getting him to the point where he like almost accidentally announces like, what should I do? Should I just announce myself the King of Gorha? And then she has this little wry smile where she's like, yeah, we got him there, like we and those scenes are so much more compelling to read, where we have all the characters shining and firing on all cylinders, and Kay has the ability to make each perspective vivid and unique. And I personally, as a reader, love palace intrigue and court politics and stuff. So I could read that stuff all day. And he's great at that. And there's a lot of it here. And so I love seeing Blaise's character arc throughout the book, which is the character arc of the book, is the one where you have that dynamic change, like Joanna was saying, from a kind of dismissive, misogynist masculinity to one that incorporates the things he's learned from all the characters in Arbonne, especially the female characters. So yeah, I really loved taking that journey with him.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's good stuff. I think we should talk about Blaise's somewhat dysfunctional family.
Yes.
Before
It's
I want to
important. I
move,
think that adds a lot to
I
who
want to
he
pivot
is.
back to Arbonne, but I think, yeah, to understand Blaise, you have to understand where he comes from. And Gorho, if that's how it's pronounced.
Yeah. At least in the audiobook, that's how he
Okay, Gorho.
pronounces
Yeah.
it.
That's what I was
Yeah.
going with. But anyway, yeah, his father Galbert is really quite a piece of work, isn't he? And I mentioned earlier, he reminds me of something that I wanted to explore in my own books, a character named Bledla, if anyone's read my
Mm.
books.
Yeah.
And then Adamar being his tool, his pawn, so to speak, as the king of Gorho, but also someone whose hedonism and narcissism make him a willing tool most of the time and manipulatable for Galbert. But then of course there's Ranald as well, and we have to talk about Rosala
Oh, of course.
Hmm.
as a really I felt toward the end of the book much more important character than I realized she was in the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand it over to you guys first, and your thoughts on any of the family up in Gorho.
I have a question for the panel on Galbert. Just like,
Sure, sure.
do you feel that he was too evil? My question is, so what are his reasons for wanting to launch the war against Arbonne, right? Like, he wants to snuff out, like it's the Albigensian Crusade thing. Like, he is the Arnaud Amaury, the papal legate that Philip quoted earlier, kill them all, let God sort them out. He's that type of person. Do you feel that his conviction about his own religion came through to you in the book to the point where you felt his hatred of the heresy that is the worship of the goddess Rian? I'm not sure that I got completely there, but I was just enjoying. I mean, I was enjoying it so much that I didn't really care, because sometimes like a cartoonishly evil villain is fun, especially if all the characters around it are being uh, done so well. What did you guys think about Galbert?
I have a response, but I want you guys to go first. So,
I felt it's a little bit more nuanced in reread. just a little bit, but he is still more of the mustache twirling type of villain. What I found most interesting about the character in the reread was the kind of his death scene. Well, not his death scene. The last scene with Blaise before he
Yeah.
lets Rudel killed him, right? I think. But the last scene with that. The first time he almost tricked me into thinking that he was legit, but then when I reread it, I was like, no, he's just still full of it all the way
Yeah,
to the end.
that's what I took too.
Yeah, so I did feel that there was a little bit of nuance, but yeah, I like what you said that sometimes it is just fun to have just an evil guy to kind of hate on. But I also do feel that there are people like that in real life that are so firm in their personal convictions that they're blinded to everything else. So it didn't really bother me that he was, like super bad, evil guy in this book.
Joanna, any
Same,
thoughts
pretty
on?
much the same. I feel like I actually had that thought at one point. Like, is this guy just too much in a way?
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
just so extreme, especially the part where he starts, what is it? I'm trying to think of it, how he starts praying to his God to like kill his son. Do you, I can't think of
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yes, indeed.
Okay.
To Coranos, that not just kill Blaise, but that he would suffer all kinds of horrible torments in hell
It,
forever. Yeah,
it went pretty far.
yeah.
Oh
And I think
yes,
that,
yes. No, no, no.
you
I
know
do
what I'm
And
talking
then
remember.
about?
later
Yeah.
he says, "Actually, I was planning this the whole time to make you king."
That's
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
it. So like I had a similar well, I had a journey of like, oh my goodness, this guy is just so off the charts, psychotic or crazy and mustache twirling, like Josh's language. And I thought it was maybe just a little far at that point. But then when he said, actually, I did this all for you, and I felt Blaze struggling with is he telling the truth or not? And like just that feeling of doubt in Blaze, oh, that got under my skin. Like that twisted my heart. And I'm pretty sure he was lying, but there was a moment
Yeah.
where I was like, I don't know if he's lying or not. And I'm gonna let Blaze figure that out and tell me. And I
I
think
was like, "What
yeah.
was your plan? What was your plan again?" Like
Yeah.
at the end
Right.
when he was explaining this, like, "Okay, wait, what?" I had to read it a few times. I was like,
Yeah.
"Is this a master plan?" And then I went with what Josh was saying. Is this is him just
Well,
bullshitting
this is
But
to
him
the last.
being. Go ahead, Joanna. You
oh
finish.
oh sorry. I'd love to hear what your thought is though, Philip, because I think if it was just him playing Blaze, like was the only motive in that just to make Blaze suffer more?
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. Like that was wow. I have to admire that in some ways, like I just how monstrous that is, and it just twisted things in a direction I just didn't expect. Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah. No, I love all your thoughts there. I think he's a bit Iago-like in a sense,
Yes,
because
yes.
Iago keeps changing his motivation for bringing about Othello's downfall, constantly throwing out different, oh, this is why I'm doing this. Actually, no, this is why I'm doing this. And uh, Galbert is a manipulator. He's a manipulator. He likes being powerful. He likes being in charge. He is hyper masculine in the worst way. And Josh actually said something that really I think is the heart of it for me. There are people like this.
Oh yeah,
So there actually are people like this I've met, and as I said, I wrote a character like him over the course of a trilogy. I had more room to explore that maybe, and to show maybe a little bit more motive. But I actually think there are just people like this who feel powerful in hurting other people. The type of people who burn people alive, and they feel powerful from that. They feel right. The act of hurting other people makes them feel more right about what they're doing because obviously God is allowing them to do this, therefore they must be right, you know. So,
yeah, yeah.
I had the same thought as you, Evan. And by the end of it, I was like, yeah, this guy feels real to me as well, because
Yeah.
there are people like this in the world.
I have a
There's no doubt that there's people like that. The question is, for me, was am I buying into his like is am I buying into his conviction to do these things? I have no doubt that there are people who are that Machiavellian. And the reason he's interesting for me is not necessarily because Kay got there in that respect. It's more because the Machiavellian manipulative plan is actually interesting as it's unfolding and as we learn about it through the other characters. And again, like, you know, having a, a, a baddie can be fun. And this again is also a romance in a way. I mean, it is a universalized story where there's realist elements and there's also elements that are unreal. And so like, or not unreal, but archetypal. And so I'm okay with it not being like, I don't need to have compassion for or like empathy for Galbert. You know, I don't need to have that. But
The thing is
yeah,
that leaders like him, and I say leaders very, with air quotes around it,
yeah,
never admit you're wrong. That is their motto.
yeah.
Never admit you're wrong. And so he'll change. Oh, actually, this
You don't
just
you don't have someone in mind, do you?
Uh,
Eh. Never apologize and never admit you're wrong, and you'll be more powerful that way. Or people if people buy it, and it's worked for Galbert for quite a while there. So
Yeah. Um, I want to circle back though with Galbert to earlier in the book with Rosala, his interaction with
yes,
Rosala,
yeah, that scene.
because it's a similar thing where I was questioning, did he have this plan all along that he reveals about her child, or does he decide that on the spot just to get to her? Or it almost sounds like they even question later, like, did they want her to run away so that he could instigate this war? It's a little complicated. I'm not sure. I also want to quickly point out that when talking to Jake Bishop about this book, he brought up this excellent observation about, I wonder if you all noticed it, about whenever we're in Gorho,
present tense.
we're in present tense.
Yeah.
And whenever
Yeah.
we're in Arbonne, it's past tense. And I think that that is so interesting. I noticed it so much more on the reread. It made it such a different experience noticing that
Yeah, so
immediacy.
that was a question I had for you three. Why do you think Kay put the moments in? Actually, it's whenever we're with Galbert or I think Adamar as well. But there's the why use the present tense for those characters? And what obviously we're talking about cultural difference here. This
Mhm.
is a story in many ways of dualities. So that is clearly highlighting the difference because you mentioned the people from Gorho present tense, Arbonne, past tense. And so maybe
Oh
that's
yeah, okay. Now I'm getting
I
it.
I also wonder, so this kind of plays into something I heard Janie Wirtz say about Kay's prose. She calls it lyric nostalgia, which I love that description. I think it's absolutely perfect. And in many ways, this book was nostalgic for me because it brought me back to thinking about like my first steps as a musician when I'm a freshman music major, reading about the troubadours and all of that. But anyway, just to get to this point, I think when something is nostalgic and we're looking back, we're often looking at it in a more idealized form and we're looking at it a lot more colorfully. So perhaps that's one reason that he has the past tense for the Arbonne scenes because we're looking back with this beauty and that, but we don't want to look at the gore host scenes like this. Because for me, the gore host scenes, in many ways, I don't often visualize things, but I was seeing a lot of like monochromatic scenes
uh-huh.
with
Mhm.
them. So
Nice.
maybe the prose tied into that. I'm just kind of spitballing, but it kind of makes me think about that when I think about just, Kay's intention in that aspect.
I mean,
That's
it's
such a
certainly
great
calling
that's
attention.
such a great point.
Yeah. R. Scott Baker does it too in the Second Apocalypse series. Remember, Joanna?
Yeah.
Certain characters, he'll put it in present tense, and it certainly does call attention to those moments. Evan, you were thinking something though.
Yeah. What is
Well,
it?
I was just gonna say that Josh has now got me thinking about this
Mhm.
and this idea of, there is a kind of melancholy and a nostalgia to the whole book, but also specifically to the culture of Arbonne, which really parallels the real world situation of Occitan. And if you pretty much right after the first generation of troubadours, the almost from the very beginning, they were already talking about a golden age that was past, that is no longer here anymore, and what a shame it is that we now have to live in this, much worse world. And you get that feeling here, and there's something very poignant knowing about the real history, which is that the real world culture of the troubadours is destroyed essentially, and all of that Occitanian culture it is severely diminished by the Albigensian Crusade, and we have this northern French model of culture tied to a reforming church, which is way more misogynist in its reforming of its institutions. And so we have this like brief period where we have this beautiful moment of song and a complicated, but a space for women to express themselves a little more than they had before, and maybe won't have again. And we have this eucatastrophe moment in the book where we have a happier ending to this, where we have a coming together of the masculine and feminine in Blaise and Renette, and a world in which these things are in balance. And in the real world, it didn't quite happen like that. And so there is this kind of poignant sense of loss to everything that's happening to the Arbonne culture. And maybe Josh, maybe think about that, and past tense.
Well, I'll just say you both. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just a quick one for me, and then I'll let you have it, Joanna.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
And how many of those characters are living in the past as well, like Bertrand, for example, or Signe? There's a tendency
Great point
to really be dwelling in the past much of the time internally. And they're still, Bertrand is 23 years back all the time. Signe's constantly thinking about Guibor, her husband that she's lost, and what would he have done, So there's a lot of living in the past as well for the character.
There's a great quote from Bertrand where he says, "The dead can drive you hard," and that is very, very felt.
So sorry, Joanna, you go ahead.
No, I'm glad I let you speak first, because that is such an excellent insight. I love what all three of you said. Like, that's perfect. And it's coming to me too, as Evan, you were talking about that, is that the songs themselves are about the past too.
Yeah.
They're talking about the history or what's happened there with the treaty, or even Lassault's songs. I think she even sings about Fiona Var. Doesn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. Call out. Yeah.
It's like, okay, he's got to do it.
Yeah. So I think there is something, like you all three are saying, there's something melancholy, nostalgic, poignant, and reflective in the culture of Arbonne. And additionally, I think that the present tense in Gorho, to me, it just gets my nervous system a little bit more, it like brings a little bit more of an edge to my nervous system. Like, what are these guys doing? It brings this immediacy and then I think this heightened sense of action to what's going on there. And I also can agree with you, as somebody who is a visual reader. I do think there is something monochromatic about Gorho as well, Josh. And I think like there's a lot of description of darkness and fog, and yeah, I think that was well said too.
Brilliant. All right, we got to touch on Ronald and Rosala before we move south. So thoughts on the Ronald was obviously I kind of knew where his arc was going. I knew he was not going to survive this book. I knew he was going to have that moment of, damn it, I'm not going to be this, cowed, drunken loser that my father keeps pushing me into being. He was going to have that moment. And of course, he was doomed as well. As soon as he opened his mouth to challenge Adhemar, we knew he was not going to win that fight. And
tragic.
The other characters were all like, yeah, but he almost did, except his father.
Yeah.
Killed him.
Don't you hate when that happens?
I mean, he almost did it. Ronald almost was the hero there. So, and then I think we'll talk about him, and then Rosala, who I think is actually probably the most interesting character from Gorho to talk about. But thoughts on Ronald for anyone?
The most devastating part of his arc was the moment where he's dying. I think he's just about to die, and he has a memory, I think, of his mom or something in his past, and he has the thought, this is the type of thing I could have shared with Rosala. Like
Yes.
we could have talked about this stuff, and it's like this is it's essentially an image of what a true marriage can be, what a relationship between a man and woman can be. He has it far too late, obviously, but it's such a poignant, sad moment, and then then he's gone. But I did also find the moment where he stands up at the end to Adamar as a very stirring moment, and I was very into that
It was beautiful.
fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you have to feel sad for him. He was forced to watch uh, people being burned alive on his property every year. I mean, Blaise too. That's a tough childhood. And we've talked a lot about how women are circumscribed by medieval culture, but men are too. And being the firstborn of someone in a noble family, his options are also extremely limited. In many ways, Blaise has more freedom to go out and travel the world and be a mercenary and get into all kinds of romantic trysts, while Renaud is kind of doomed to be on the Garsong property doing what his father wants because he's the firstborn. So yeah, tragic character, but again, a small character that is very vivid, and Kay's great at that.
Yeah, for sure. Josh or Joanna?
I appreciated how Kay didn't take the easy way out with uh, Renault. The scene where he could have kind of gone away from his father and gone with Blaise, and Blaise was, said that would have been just an easy way out for him to have a little bit of a character arc and to join Blaise. But I appreciated that there was still that, I don't know, that little bit of pride in the character that he, still wanted to go back and prove himself. And he was a character, he wasn't on the page a lot, but he did certainly have quite a bit of impact. And his last scene was, man, it was just you start the duel and they just say, if it would have been 10 years ago, like this wouldn't have been a
Yeah.
competition, but he's a drunk and he's drunk today and he's out of
Oh
practice.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so the whole time we're thinking, oh, this is going to be tragic. And then he just takes this move and then and it just adds to Galbert being just the
The worst.
super evil
He's not winning Dad
guy.
of the Year, that's for sure.
Not at all. But man, that scene, Evan, I hadn't forgot about it, but I like just remembering that little moment. You're right. He did have this little epiphany where maybe that would have been something because at the end, she forgives him and man, so such a good little character arc. I mean, Kay's
Yeah.
good at that, taking a character that you don't see very often and just giving you just a lot of depth and a lot of things to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting to change my mind about him by the end of the book, and see him in a more tragic light rather than just thinking he was horrible, like a horrible person, passive. Yeah, it's he had such a journey, and I think that something that also was interesting, an interesting reveal towards the end is that he taught Blaise how to use a sword, and not only that, he got beaten for it. So basically, speaking to Evan's point, that as the firstborn, it seemed like he got worse treatment from his father than Blaise did, is the impression that I got. So yeah, it's a pretty tragic character. I agree.
So how about this really interesting parallel between Rosala and another thing that was set up in the prologue with Elise, being both women who took it upon themselves to conceive. And in the case of Rosala, she does so with Blaise, with her brother-in-law, as a moment of defiance, as a moment of empowerment. A little bit different from what happens with Elise, but I think there are some interesting parallels there, aren't there? And of course, Rosala being a very different character, she has her own wisdom, something that it turns out that she shares with her brother as well, who turned out to be a pretty cool dude in the story too, who chooses the right side after also witnessing. So he and Ronald both saw the same thing, were forced to participate in the same thing, but he takes a different route. He at the first opportunity, decides to support Blaise, whereas Ronald tragically remains passive and goes like a whip dog back to their father, at least until the very end. But yeah, Rosala, thoughts on her character and her fleeing for her life and her role in all of this. Anyone?
It was such a surprise to me because at the beginning, we know that Blaise, I mean, it's pretty clear, it's pretty obvious to put it together that she's the one that he slept with and he did it out of defiance. And it paints him in a pretty negative light right
Yeah.
away. And then for her, we realize, oh, she wanted it. She consented, and this was her plan. That was a surprise to me. I did not expect. Um, yeah, fantastic character, very willful. I was just impressed with her courage, her bravery. And I know this speaks to more Blaise's character, but I remember I got teary-eyed the first time I read this book with the scene when Blaise, she tries to kneel to Blaise and Blaise won't let her. And he kneels to her like that. That choked me up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Thinking about actually both of those characters together, the scene where, well, first of all, the scene that drove Rosala to leave when Renaud finds out about that. That informs quite a bit of his character because he is, like you were saying, Philip, how he was so abused as an older son and how Galbert wanted to take Rosala's son and raise that kind of as his own, as the new heir to Garçonque. And that was, I think, something that started the little bit of a fracture from Renaud waking up from this, this drunkenness and trying to get away from his father, realizing like, I can't have my son do this, go through this. And then I also love that, everybody knows, but it's never said that Rosala's son is anybody but Renault's. And I love that that was just, something that maybe she's just finally loyal to him at the end, or, we don't want Blaise to have the bastard child or whatever. But I like that that was something that was kept kind of just personal and Blaise knew but didn't know, or
I think he
Albert
knew. If
guessed.
he's pretty
Albert
much revealed,
guessed.
he knows.
yeah,
He
yeah.
Yeah.
figures it out.
Albert guessed it too,
And
but
Galbert did
Yeah,
guess
because I
it.
guess Renault didn't have any bastards and he had sowed his oats as a youngster. So, yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
The first time we see Rosala is in a scene of pretty brutal sexual
Oh,
violence,
yeah.
Yes.
which is certainly the hardest passage to read the book for me.
Mhm.
Um, and I didn't know that we were focalized on her in that scene until
Later.
quite
Yes.
later.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting way to introduce the character. I mean,
Mhm.
she's seen quite a bit living here among this northern misogynistic culture, and she's got firsthand experience of it. Then she becomes I'd say, well, let's just say that she has a resourcefulness that in an agency that she uses that is not that she doesn't need the help of a man to enact. Her traveling down or taking this very treacherous, trip from the north to the south through mountains.
9 months pregnant.
Yeah, yeah, being pregnant. I mean, yeah, and is able to create a safe space for her child, who and the tryst between, like Philip said before, the tryst between Rosala and Blaise, this is again going back to the prologue. It's a mirror. It is an image of the tryst between Elise and Bertrand, except for this one is a loveless tryst. It is one that happens purely on the basis of I guess revenge. You know, it it's loveless. Let's just say that. And Rosala takes that and makes something of it for herself, for her child. She doesn't abandon them, and I just love reading those sections. I love the sections where she was with that in that on that cart or on that traveling down to Arbonne. I love reading all that, and yeah, it just again another very vivid character, and
Naming.
another yeah, yeah.
I was going to say,
What?
and naming her son for her father was her way of claiming him from this patriarchal culture of empower. It was a moment of empowerment when she
Yeah.
named her son after her father and used her maiden name for his last name. But
And
then
her
later gives Ranald his little redemption, gives Ranald that little moment of,
Mhm.
okay, we'll name him after you too. You know, that was the bit. So that was sweet. I
That was
loved it.
nice.
And that was interesting too because she comes from one of these vassal families of the Gorhawk crown
Right.
who and if Folk is her brother, right?
Hulk is the brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, they are none too pleased with the Treaty of Ireson Bridge,
Right.
and yet she's attached to the to the ruling families. So it's all interesting, and I love reading about her. Um, yeah,
All
and
right.
again, it's another example of different women dealing with their destinies in different ways. That quote from
Yes.
the prologue,
Yes.
it's another image of a I guess you could say an echo or even a foil of Elise from the prologue.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah, and she goes through such an emotional journey too, especially when the news comes out about the attack and the burning of those women, and she realizes this is because of my child, like just the heaviness that she experiences because of that. So she does go through quite an emotional journey
Oh
throughout
yeah.
this book. My goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey
But
Philip, can we pause for one second?
yeah, absolutely.
I have to go lift my child into her.
Okay, we're back. And while we were taking a quick break, uh, we mentioned earlier how Kay is so skilled at introducing scenes that are just full of tension. And one of my favorite moments in this, in a character that just sprang out of the page for me, was the introduction of Rudel. This is Blaise's friend from Porteza, who actually attempts to assassinate Bertrand, ends up shooting poor Valerie in the shoulder with a poisoned arrow.
Guy can't
But
catch a break, man.
and that scene where Blaise confronts him in his family palace in that port town there on the south of Arbonne during the festival and all that. While the whole time I thought, and the POV character here is Liso. And Liso is spying, is watching from the wall this entire conversation take place. But what an introduction to a character, and what marvelous tension that
Yes.
is just all over that scene. I just love that scene so much. And I thought, wow, this is how you introduce a character right here. But the fact that he's been manipulated by Galbert kind of irks him as well, realizing that probably, and this tells you how many strings this guy Galbert is pulling. He hired him particularly because he knew he was a friend of Blaise's, and he wanted to stick it to Blaise in
For
that.
a cool 250,000.
Yeah,
I don't know how
gold,
much that I don't know how much that means in this world, but it seems like
a
a
lot,
lot.
a lot. Yeah. So yeah, I just thought that was such a great scene and a good example of Kay, one of these iconic scenes. Another one being one of my favorites, the one that brought me to tears, was when Ramir, who is
I knew it. I
the
knew it.
oh my goodness, when Ramir sings the old song in challenge to the fellow from Gutzland, which I love. I love that
Our
we have
Germans.
a German sound, Gutzland. I love that we have a kind of a German sounding neighbor here. But that the answer to that challenge that Ramir gives in this quiet, competent manner, and at first everyone's afraid, like, oh, he's old, he's gonna drop this, he's gonna. But my goodness, what a scene! And by the end of it, my tears were just flowing. And this
Mm.
is about the remembrance of a whole culture. And there's just so much going on in that scene, but just another full of tension in a different way, but just brilliantly written scene. I don't know. You guys have any thoughts on either of those?
You threw out two really great scenes. Let me talk about
Oh
the
yeah.
second one first.
Okay.
I was dense, but I didn't realize that scene. I mean, that's the title of the book because that's the scene where he
Oh,
sings a
problem.
song for Arbonne.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after, like we had Joanna, we had a chat with Jake, and it was like after that where I realized, oh, I'm so dense. Like that scene, which because I remember bringing it up when we had that chat. I was like, "Did you remember this scene in the middle?" Because it hit me like a ton of bricks. That's a
Me
scene.
too.
All three times I've read it, it made me cry. Even just the audio listening to it, because it's so well written, and it just has just the depth in this character. And I love the way that it unfolds at the beginning. How I think we're seeing it from Luceau's perspective, because she talks about how he
Yeah.
begins the scene, and he starts the song in the old-fashioned way, where he is tuning the
Yeah.
instrument and he's talking, and
Uh,
and everyone's just prepared for him to fail, and then just he sings about how the importance of it, it just lends the weight of what's about to happen, is that this is the importance of what Arbonne is, and Arbonne may not exist after this invasion by Gorho.
Yeah.
It just incredible. I'll stop there. Let's maybe maybe talk about each scene, because I think they're both so good, and I just
Yeah.
had to talk about that one because I
no, but let's stick on
loved
this
it.
one though, because this one
It's
is this
my
one
it
is
is my favorite scene in the book.
I think it's mine too, in addition to the one I talked about earlier with Signe. But the I was thinking about you and Joanna while reading this because it's such a powerful evocation of song with him, and it's all connected in such a beautiful way because he starts, with this beautiful, you know, finger picking the instrument, and it's like these notes are kind of floating through the room, and people are waiting, and he knows the tricks of the trade because what is it, Ramir? What is it, Ramir?
Ramir.
Ramir.
Ramir is an old juggler, right? So he is in medieval Occitania, there were the troubadours who were the writers and often performers of the work, and they were often aristocrats. So they had other ways of being making money. They weren't traveling around singing for their bread, as it were, but they had this lower level of jonglers or jogglers who were the performers of the songs written by the troubadours. And Ramir is Bertrand's joggler, but he's got more gravitas than a lot of the troubadours. I mean, there are other troubadours in the rooms like Remy and Aurelian, these guys who are singing like the super complicated new style of troubadour song where you have to know like all the nuances, which was also a form of troubadour song called Trobar Luke, which is so fascinating. But he knows the tricks. Ramir knows the tricks. He knows that if he talks really quietly at the start, then everybody's going to lean in to listen, to hear more quietly. And he starts with the Vidan of Anselm, which is part of what we get at the very beginning of the book. We get the Vidan, which are the sort of short biographies of the troubadours, in real life, written quite a long time after they were gone, and so the truth in it is up for debate. And the book ends, of course, with Lisso's Vidan, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there. He starts with that, and the notes are flying out, and then he does this beautiful song. And the way that Kay writes it, there's a point in the song where he pauses. He sings the first verse, and he pauses, and it's just, and you can hear it. You can hear these twinkling notes going throughout this tavern. Ariane's there in the back. She's the one who is the first one to clap after it's all over because it's silent. And the Gootslanders, of course, they say at the end, okay, you guys are the preeminent singers, even though we do. So there's so much there, and obviously it's important that Lisseau is the one listening because it's so important that she's the first in this world, the first female troubadour or troubadourites who takes on and decides to sing a song for her own at the end. Brilliant scene,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Just gorgeous. Joanna, do you have any thoughts on it?
I echo what everyone said. I have it up, I have it open to those pages right now. It's just it's so bittersweet, it's so poignant, and he finishes the song, and although there's this applause and everyone stands, Lisseau notes that he doesn't go back to his corner, but he packs up his lute and he just walks out. Yeah.
Oh, that's just
Mic
walking
drop.
off into the sunset.
Yeah. It's the troubadour mic drop.
Yeah. Boom.
No, it's absolutely one of those moments in this book that you just feel the stillness around you. You feel it, like you could hear a pin drop. That's the kind of performance that you feel like you gets evoked in this book. And I mean, you hear it all the time. How many people say they skip the songs in fantasy?
Ah,
But this is, ah, I have such a hard time understanding that in general. But this song, this is such an instance where you can feel what a performance means and somehow captured in fiction and on the page. I will say though that the audiobook is excellent, and the audiobook narrator, who I fail to recall the name of at the moment, has an excellent voice and sings all the songs. So
Yeah. One last thing that has to be mentioned here is that this song that he sings is based on a real troubadour song. And
oh, no kidding.
I'm just gonna share it here. I'm not gonna sing it because I mean that would be horrible.
I'm
But
disappointed.
if you're watching, feel
Oh,
free to screenshot this. This is a song by Pierre Vidal about somebody who is an exile to his homeland, singing about the air blowing from his homeland to where he is now.
Mm,
And in the song, it's conflated this love for a woman that he has back home and the love he has for his actual home. And of course, this is a song. This is what you guys were saying is happening in the song for Arbonne that Ramir sings. The song of love for a place. It's a troubadour love song for a place and a culture that, as we've said, might be on the, the Goatslanders are the ones that say you might not be here in a year, it could be gone before they know it. So check out this song, find a version of it on YouTube or something. It's a beautiful song. And I know it's one that Kay particularly loves and was an inspiration for the whole book.
wow.
So
wow.
I wanted to share that.
Incredible.
That's lovely. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and Lisa, of course, realizes, oh yes, this actually was a love song, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
For Arbonne.
Yeah. I think
Gorgeous.
it's really beautiful how pride in one's home and one's land can come from such a depth, can come from such a place of yeah, it can come from a place of from a heartfelt place. Whereas like with Gorho, it feels like their pride is in conquest.
Yeah.
But to find pride and dignity and I guess a sort of patriotism that's not based on conquest, but rooted in culture and love, I think that's a really interesting contrast there.
Beautifully said.
And it's
Beautiful.
also the song of an exile too. It's a song of an exile, and that's what Blaise is in this book. He's an exile from his homeland, and we know Philip from reading Tigana that the plight of the
Mm,
exile is a huge theme in his work. And there is a lot to be said
true.
for the themes that carry through from Fionavar. You mentioned earlier that Fionavar is sort of it's mentioned in one of the songs. He does that in Tigana as well. But
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
the thing that really drew me to Fionavar was the midsummer thing.
Hmm.
Because while I was reading the Midsummer Festival, and does this happen at Midsummer? I forget. I think this is in autumn. But there's a moment in the Midsummer section where I just thought for a second, like, oh yeah, this is when oh wait, I'm not gonna spoil. I forgot that Joanna didn't read hasn't read Fionavar. But
Never read Fiona Barber.
there's a big moment that happens at Midsummer in Fionavar, and it made me think. All of a sudden it had that feeling of the Fionavar first of all worlds thing, and all these worlds kind of accordion. And I was like, oh yeah, this is also happening in Fionavar, and a little bit of what he was doing there was coming through to me, and I felt a moment of, oh wow, I'm glad I'm reading all these books, getting these extra resonances.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
I think that's it. You know, it's interesting too. I'll just quickly point out because I think Tigana, if I recall correctly, isn't that divided also into sections by season? Am I remembering that correctly?
Is it? I don't.
Um,
Yeah, let me know. I could be wrong
I
about
do
that,
know
but
that seasonality plays a huge part.
maybe that's what it is. Yeah, I
Even if
think
it's
this is
Yeah,
not,
season.
it's not labeled the same way by the seasons.
Oh,
There's
okay.
part one, a blade in the soul, and then there's so there are parts, but it's not labeled by season. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting because he does play so much attention to seasons in his
oh yeah.
books. And something when we had our Tigana discussion, Josh and I had a Tigana discussion with Bridger from the Library Ladder. And I
Uh-huh.
remember that Bridger talked about art being so important in Kay's books. It's not only that he draws so much inspiration from history, but he also draws so much inspiration from poetry, from music, from art. And you'll see that, of course, with the Sarantine Mosaic duology when you get there. But so it's again, I think maybe I just didn't articulate this well enough, but it's like when you could have pride in your culture based on the humanities, which is something I know, Philip, you talk a lot about the lack of funding or the dying of the humanities nowadays, and how we don't honor and acknowledge the importance of that. And I think Kay's works, maybe because they are historical, they speak to the beauty and the power of the humanities to enrich a culture. And yet we see Gorho as kind of a stark contrast to that. Again, I think that their identity is largely rooted in conquest again. So yeah, just really interesting though. I love those little details in his writing.
Again, beautifully said. Wow. You're on a roll, Joanna.
Just
Um,
making connections as I go.
yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. I want to, we have to talk about the big battle scene and all
Oh
that,
yeah.
all the repercussions. But I will say, just to get it out here, the other scene that had me absolutely in tears, and it surprised me because I expected when we found out that Renette was the twin that was born to Elise, and this time had been raised as one of the priestesses. She didn't know who she was, found out. And then, of course, Ariane reveals this. We get to see her reveal it later, and then explain things as well to poor Blaise. But the scene that got me, and I expected as Renette had returned to Talair to meet her father, we're expecting this thing to. Kay upends a lot of my expectations at the end of this. So one of them being I expected a meeting, I was hoping for even a meeting between Bertrand and Renette. And I thought, okay, maybe I don't think Kay would go here, but because this is sort of being set up, Blaise and Renette, maybe another, because they did meet earlier, of course, because she's the priestess who witnesses him defending himself from the six attackers, and so on. But what he gave me was so much more beautiful than I even expected, and that was the meeting between Renette and her grandmother, Signe.
Mm.
And that scene broke me. That was just
Yeah.
so because you can
Oh,
feel all that grief that Signe had for her daughter in that moment.
Yeah.
Again, repercussions of the prologue.
Yeah,
yes. So well said about the prologue.
yeah.
But and what really got me about the Renette of it all is Ariane, actually,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
because she's, the thing about like the relationship between Ariane and Blaise is the one true love relationship of the book.
Yes.
That's what Kay's trying to build up.
Yes.
And Ariane must know that, I mean, maybe she doesn't know fully, but some part of her must know that by revealing the truth that she's kept so long, that the political settlement is going to compel Blaise and Renette to come together to create an end to the hostilities between the North and the South, right? By revealing this information, she's already married, of course. I mean, we can't forget that.
There's
But by
that.
revealing this information, she's putting him even further away from him. And it's a sad moment because it's a love that she can't realize, she can't make real and legal and all that stuff. And even at the end, she does say that, all that stuff I said to you about fighting for true love matches, that was all folly. It's never going to happen. You can see she's a little bit bitter because she knows the reality of the situation. And I do love that Kay ended it like that, with the political realities of this situation. Although in Lisso's Vidan, at
Oh,
the end, I don't know if you guys thought this, but I thought this. He gets remarried.
Yeah.
he
So
has two. There were two wives.
two wives. So the
Yeah.
first wife is obviously Renette, right? Right?
Well, we
Yeah.
don't know though, do we?
Oh yeah, well, we
Yeah,
don't
we do.
see it, but
Assuming.
that's what I'm thinking.
I think so.
And in my head canon, this Ariane's husband, tragically passes away,
Poor
and
guy.
Aw.
and he and Renette passes away, and Ariane and Blaise get together.
Love
as
marriage.
that's what that second
I
marriage is.
actually
I don't know
thought
if you guys thought
exactly
that.
the same thing. I thought
Yeah.
exactly the same thing. That was my imagination as well. But we don't know. And Kay does this. He likes to do this
Yeah.
to us. He did it at the
Hmm.
end of Tigana too, where he leaves these things suggested but not confirmed. But yeah,
It's great. No, I love just thinking back, the more we think about this, the role of Ariane at the end
hmm,
when she knows, when Urte is dead, and then she knows now she can reveal everything. You realize that the prologue in many ways was about her as much as
Yes.
Elise and
yes.
Bertrand.
So right, Josh.
And I think it adds even more kind of weight to what her life has been because, she was like a 12-year-old girl and she grew up like right there with the events that happened there and then the ones that she reveals later. Um, and it does add a lot to her character. And you do feel bad because you do want to see, we always want to see our pairings, but it's not real. And Kay always goes for the realism, most of the time and things like that. But then I think he also just one of you brought up the term melancholy. He just always seems to end on that perfect balance of like the bitter and the sweet, which
Yeah.
for me is literature. I think the best literature is the things that end like that. It's not the ones that are the perfect happy bow at the end, but the ones where they feel good, but they also hurt and they just bring so much more emotion out of you. And the end of this book certainly did all of those things for me.
Yeah. So well said, Josh. And
It's
the
such a
other
great point about Ariane too in the prologue because we said before that I said before that Elise, she makes a decision that has political consequences, but some part of her doesn't care about that because she's going to do what she needs to do to fall in love with, to consummate the love with Bertrand. But Elise, witnessing all this, she doesn't make the same set of decisions.
Ariane,
The
yeah.
thing that she says at some point in the book is that she prizes the discretion. Like she understands that you have to that these political matches have a purpose, and that you can have like she's going to have a love relationship, a consummation with Blaise, and she does in the book, but it's not one that it's one that she's careful to not allow to disrupt the delicate political balance of the situation.
Mm.
And she's going to be fighting more behind the scenes to make change instead of saying, I want this, and so I'm just going to take it, come what may.
Great observation. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to mention how, in relation to what Josh was saying about how we get this really beautiful, convincing, compelling ending because of the melancholy, because we get, in addition to the romance, a dose of reality. There's the character of Liso, who is in love with Blaise at this
Hmm.
point and realizes, I love the analogy of the stone and splashing in the water and then it just sinks down into the bottom and that's a much more quiet kind of pain that she's going through. But then she acknowledges, well, it's probably more than I'm trying to make it too, because I'm not over this really. But then we learn at the end too that she has a child, and
Yes.
and there's speculation about who's the daddy of Liso's kid. Do we know? And we do know that Liso is good friends with both of Blaise's wives. We know that, so we know that they had remained very close. So again, this is Kay kind of suggesting but not confirming. Is Blaise the father of Lisa? Would that be right? I don't know. Who's the father? We don't know. I guess is the answer. But anyway, any other thoughts on any of this from any of you guys? Did
Just
I
to
skip
add
you?
really quickly to the nostalgia thing, there's a quote here towards, I guess it's more in the like last quarter of the book, where it says, "How Blaise thought did one trace back the line of a life to see where the fork appeared that had led to these ramparts? He couldn't answer that. Perhaps a poet could, or a priestess. But he was a soldier, and yes, a would-be king, and the time. Well, especially that first part, that is such a Guy Gabriel Kay quote, if I've ever heard one. You will hear that echo through every Guy Gabriel Kay book you read. Am I right, Josh? There's almost
Absolutely.
always a
It's a
fork
it's
in the
a
road of our
Kayism.
lives. Yes, it's a Kayism. It's a
Yeah.
Kayism.
I love it.
But it speaks to that, what is it, lyric nostalgia that Jenny Wirth
Yeah.
said about his writing? Absolutely.
Well, I mean, that's a it's speaking of K-isms, I mean, one of the things that I criticized about the Fiona of Our tapestry was that the prose was I think of Kay's for some reason I have this image of Kay's prose as a volume dial where he turns up the lyricality and the poeticness, sometimes all the way up, and in the Fionavar, I think for reasons that we talked about that were necessary because of the plot but didn't always work for me, the dial was turned up to 10 for a fair bit of the story, and it was a little bit exhausting. In this book, he's gotten to a place now where he knows exactly when to turn the dial of the poetry up
Mm.
so that it's not too much. But when it comes, like for example, in the scene that we talked about with Ramir and the song, or a stray paragraph here and there where it's all of a sudden these like repetitive clauses and, titles are being repeated and, the sentence structure changes a little bit. He knows now much more deftly how to bring those moments in so that they have the greatest amount of impact. And I love seeing him learn how to modulate that part of his prose because, you know, I'm guilty of this too. If you like language, you want to sometimes you just want to do all the poet and you as a writer, Philip, you might
Right.
know this too. Yeah, you want to do super poetry all the time because that's the fun stuff. But you also know that, too much of chocolate cake can be a little bit can give you a stomach ache. So, you have to know when to bring it in. And I so love watching him learn his craft as we move through the books.
So I could go on forever, but I feel like we are nearing the end, but we have to talk about the end before we can finish here. That battle, which I mainly want to just mention how it is so cool that Signe and Urte
Mm.
devised this scheme to have
Hmm.
Urte very publicly get angry because she's making Bertrand the commander of the army, and he puts on a good act too, by the way. What I felt, and there's the brilliance of the red arrow, which we already mentioned, with Luce's little moment of his moment, and I love how he goes back, feeling a sense
Mm.
of fulfillment from that. But maybe one of the most powerful scenes, once again, is the last meeting between Urte and Bertrand, where Urte is dying, having been cloven by Adamar before Adamar's demise, and this was such a beautiful moment of just letting go of so much of what had defined the two of them. I can imagine Bertrand after this being a very different person. Uh, and the moment of the reveal, I want to ask you guys how you felt about that reveal when Orte actually says, "Yeah, there was a kid. He was born, and I took him away, and unfortunately, because he was born 2 months early, he died, and that was it. He wasn't this sinister villain that some people thought he was. It was really much more of just a tragic thing that the two of them being foes for so long, they're almost closer than lovers in some way. And the
Mm.
absence of Orte now is going to totally redefine Bertrand, who is probably going to feel very differently now that he knows what happened with Elise and with his son. And then, of course, later through Ariane, we find out about Renette. But your thoughts on that last encounter between Bertrand and Orte, guys? Who wants to talk about that?
For me, I mean, there's a lot in that final scene, but for me, the telling part of the final scene is where Bertrand is just like, you didn't love her, and Urte's like, no, I loved her. She didn't love me.
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness. And then he kept all of that, and you see, we could have had a whole nother book from Urte's wounded perspective because we had Bertrand, which was it was illustrated so well that scene after he had the tryst where he knocked out Blaise, and the next morning, he was kind of vulnerable, where he's just like he's been searching for 23 years, and Urte's probably been mourning for 23 years as well because he loved someone and it was an unrequited love from him. So
Yeah.
I think it really reframed that character so much, and that for me that was the key part of that scene where I was just like, damn. I mean, this changes just everything that went before it for really both of these characters, because so much of what Bertrand's hatred and was steeped in was something, it was a story that he told himself that, this man didn't love her, or and that wasn't the case. It was just that she was married to him and she didn't love him. I mean, man, it was two tragedies that caused 23 years of strife for these two dukes.
Yeah. What about you, Joanna?
Well, I think she really, I get the impression, and maybe there could be a different reading of this. I got the impression from the prologue that she truly believed he didn't love her.
She believed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And so when she tells that to Bertrand, that is the story he believes throughout the book. And I think we're made throughout the book to think of Urtra as a very unlikable character. We're meant to think of Bertrand as a very likable character, very interesting, intriguing character. And yeah, not not so much Urtra though. And yeah, I love what you said, Josh. I think reframe is the best way to describe it. It's a reframe of that character. It's another way I think that yeah, it was another twist on the ending I wasn't expecting. I love that. And it turned into like a almost here comes the cavalry kind of trope situation where they come in and save the day, but then he dies. And it's just such a heart-wrenching scene. It's such a powerful ending.
It's
Yeah,
kind of a there's a little parallel with Renault's arc as well. How both
yeah.
of them kind of they loved women, but they didn't know how to show it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, we
yeah.
see from we again, once again we see from the prologue, the first image we get of Urte is of the sweaty night thrustings, of
Mm.
this loveless marriage that Elise is forced into, and but this is all from her perspective. And I love
Mhm.
what Josh said about the book, the alternate book uh, where Urte is focalized. We don't know what was going on in his head. We learn a little bit of it at the end. I never felt that he was a sinister energy in the book. I thought that, he there was more to him. And when he leaves to, join the northern people, I thought this isn't real. I mean, that didn't quite get me. I thought there's going to be a switcheroo here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he had a lot of presence on the page, Orte. And he shows up in an like there's a what I loved about the book too is that like there are a couple scenes at the beginning where there's a fair or something where Urte and Bertrand are actually having, words with each other. And it's not like they're kept apart for the whole book. You get to see a little bit of this bitterness acted out. And that and another character we didn't really talk about, Signe, is the one who's
Oh.
holding all this together.
Yeah.
She's the one. And another character we didn't talk about, Robon, the Chancellor.
I love
Oh, yes.
He's such a
Yeah.
great character.
Competent
Oh.
guy. Yeah.
He
In
fo-
love.
he
The poor guy's in love all this time.
Yeah, and she
I
has no idea.
Years.
He's the bureaucratic version of a troubadour, you know?
Yes.
Oh.
And they focalized him for Kay focalized him for one section. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm so into this character. And
And
he didn't
Signe
really
has
show.
no idea. She has
Yeah.
no
No,
idea that he has.
no.
I mean, that is so true of life, I think, too, though, that you can have all these feelings about someone that is in your life, and they may not even know if you never even give voice to
Yeah.
that. Incredible.
Signe is a beautiful character.
Wonderful
A
character. Yeah.
beautiful character. There's a moment where in my favorite scene, like I said, where they're all talking to Blaise, where he says something about his father, and she says that must feel really terrible for you. And Blaise is sort of like taken aback, like no one's like asked him about him. Of course, his mother passed. And so all he had was this like horrible burning people alive father who was, Machiavelli. And all of a sudden there's like this kind of motherly energy coming from Signe, that's so beautiful. I mean, I guess there is one critique you could make of this book is that a lot of the female characters are instrumentalized to help Blaise's journey, to help Blaise's arc. I think it's if you wanted to make a critique, that's a critique you could make. I mean, I think There's certainly a critique you can make of the Luciana character, who kind of reminded me of Alienor from Tigana.
Oh,
Um,
it's a kink that he has. Let me tell you, the woman
yeah,
the tied up on the bed thing.
there's
It's a kink that Kay has.
there's some
Another
When it
Kay
comes to
thing.
BDSM.
the women
Yeah.
and Blaise in Blaise journey, I think you could also turn that on its head, that criticism.
Yes, I agree.
And you could argue from the perspective of actually he is dependent on them.
Yeah.
I think
Mm.
you could spin it as a more of a positive. They're not just instruments, but that he is Blaise depends on them in order to grow, and it's when he listens to them that he's able to do so. So I think that one you
Yeah,
could.
I could see the argument being made for both sides. I really could, because I think that that they clearly are, they're the female characters, the main six that we've been talking about, do have an agency, and they do, an agency that is realistic for the milieu, but one which alters the course of events in very significant ways, especially with Signe and Beatrice. Those two characters are pretty much responsible for what happens in the war, because Beatrice is doing her thing with Luth, which takes care of Adamar, and Signe is deep in the negotiations with Urte and Bertrand to make the whole switcheroo work.
Well, there's an
So,
important observation to be made here. So you have Signe is in many ways similar to Galbert. They're both string pullers, behind the scenes people, but Signe does so in a way that is more humane and acknowledges the humanity of the people she's working with. For example, her daughter Beatrice, the two of them work together brilliantly. In contrast to Galbert and Ranald, which is it's a
mhm,
relationship of complete oppression and
yeah,
exploitation. So
Mhm.
the governing style is the difference there is being highlighted, and the effectiveness of Signe as the person who's calling all the shots, but doing so in a way that's more cooperative, and wise and less exploitative and brutal, right? So I think that's an interesting contrast to be made there.
totally.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, guys? I mean, we have still,
Um,
I'm
There,
sure
there,
we're leaving out
there's
things.
one last question I had to have to open to the panel,
Okay, let's do it.
and it'll kind of sum everything up here, I think. What is fantasy? I mean, that's my question. We have a book where the magical elements are basically non-existent. I mean, they play a little
Ah!
bit, they play a little bit of a role. But if we look at Fiona Var, and we look at Tigana, and then we look at this, it made me think a lot during the reading of this, is what if you just wrote a secondary world fantasy that was just another world without magic? Would that still be fantasy? What is happening here? It's something unlike anything I've ever read, because I think I know, I think I have thought of fantasy before as something in which the supernatural elements play such a significant role in the story. And I think to a certain extent they do, but having two moons is not really like, that's just like, it's a way of him pointing up the difference between this world and his world. So
So
what do you guys make of this historical fantasy with a historical fiction with a quarter turn to the fantastic? What does it say to you about fantasy as a genre, as opposed to all the other fantasy we all love and read?
I would say that asking what is fantasy is like asking what is poetry.
Yeah.
And you could say that something is 10,000 line long Aeneid, that's poetry, or a haiku, that's poetry. Does poetry have to have rhyme? No. Can it? Yes. Does it have to have meter? No. I mean, you can have free verse, you can have all kinds of different things, and there's no one thing that is essential to it that you can say this has to be present or it's not poetry. And I feel the same about fantasy. I think it's similar. It's elusive in a sense. I think a lot of us do associate magic with fantasy, but do you have to have magic in order for it to be fantasy? That's my response. It's like asking what is poetry, I suppose. But there is, I still say, magic present.
No, there's
Yes.
certainly magic. There's no question about that. But
It's a tiny bit in comparison. You're right.
yeah,
It's less than in Tigana for sure. It's way less than is in the Fiona of Our Tapestry. But there's still some magic there, which I appreciate because I like having magic. But I like the way Kay approaches it too. What do you guys think, Josh and Joanna, about the question that Evan has posed for us?
I think that you'll see maybe the least amount of magic. The least amount of magic I've seen in a K book might be a Brightness Long Ago, but I do think that there is psychic magic in this book. And at the same time, I do understand that. And I think this is something that comes up a lot in K discussions. I I personally think that the secondary world and light use of magic is enough for me, but also I think about thematically, we deal with ideas of valor and honor and courage. I mean, I feel like those are things that signal fantasy to me. I feel this way with the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell, which I know some people argue is historical fiction, and I considered it one of my top 10 fantasy series. And I I don't know, there's a lot of argument about that in and of itself, but yeah, I feel like even if you have questions about whether magic is real or not, I still think there's enough there thematically that gives me enough of a signal that this is fantasy. Although, while we talk about chaosms, because that is a real thing, you will notice he uses the same little devices book per book, but at the same time, I feel like he does it in a way that doesn't, it feels like his own thing and it doesn't feel to me quite so conventional either. So I don't know. That's my answer to that. Josh, what do you think?
I don't know. I fantasy, historical fantasy. I mean, it's just a label, right? Um, there are, I mean, this is on the spectrum. This does have a little bit of fantasy, and there are a couple future ones that have even less. In fact, the next one you're going to read has even less. But there's a really interesting, I think I sent it to you, Philip, an essay that Kay wrote that was on his website about why he chose to do kind of this quasi-historical where he was using using historical basis and not writing historical fiction. So I would just say to anyone watching, just go look up that essay and you'll at least see why he chose not to write to set this in France and to set this as the Albigensian Crusade with just different, outcomes and things like that. It allows him to just kind of be inspired by the past, but to then kind of change outcomes and to add characters and to, just kind of play in the sandbox of the past. But yeah, I don't know. It's fantasy to me, so I
Yeah.
guess that's my
Uh,
answer. I don't know.
that's a great segue, actually, I think, just to my final thoughts, which is just that, first of all, on GGK's website, there is a section of scholarship, which I highly, highly recommend. You know, um, it's helped me to think about these books in interesting and new ways. And for most of the books, there's stuff. And there's one quote from an essay on this book that I just want to end with and share by Sylvia Borowska Scherzen.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's just this. Kay refuses to write a typical historical novel, stubbornly mixing the history, culture, and literature of the Middle Ages with apparently insignificant fantastic elements, for example, Two Moons and the Magic of Rian, to situate his prose at the fluid border between fantasy and historical fiction, which is also indicative of his other novels. In doing so, he deliberately exposes the fictionality of his prose and questions the validity of historical narratives as such, implying that perhaps they are merely a matter of interpretation, just as literature is.
Mm.
And so, what I thought coming out of this book is that fantasy is much more than the magic. It's a chance in this secondary world mold to have a greater latitude to engage with the truth of our own world. And he said as much in interviews as well. And he does that. He shows that the narratives we have about the real world bear a striking resemblance to the narratives we find in all fiction and fantasy as well. So just the form of Kay's books has gotten me thinking about this genre that we love so much. And so, yeah, I really, really loved it.
Well, I'm going to not only call it fantasy, but I'm going to call it the best of fantasy.
Oh,
Yes.
Thank you three so much. This has been so much fun. I have been looking forward to this discussion ever since we scheduled it, and this did not disappoint. I'm enjoying this so much. Josh, Joanna, you two are so wonderful. I enjoy every discussion we've ever been in. You've added to my love for this book, so thank you so much. Evan, the journey continues. We're doing this, man. We're on
onward,
on this
onward.
grand adventure. So yeah, we are going to be continuing with The Lions of Al Rassan. And that'll
Oh,
be our next read in about a month, folks. So I'll be shouting about it and all that. I'm just so excited.
oh, we're cooking with gas now, man. We're into
We
the good
are
stuff.
indeed. We are
You're
indeed.
you're at the stretch of peak K.
Oh,
I'll take
Yeah.
it. I'll take it. But that is it from us for now. Until next time. Why did I not hit it? I missed
we
it
could talk for
again.
another